Today is March 6th of 2023. Welcome to the Wyrdest Web podcast 3.0, thread number 1, Magic Lessons. Now, as you know, yesterday was intended to be an artist series podcast. However, our guest just flew an enormous international distance and she still needed a little time to get adjusted to the time change, etc. So it felt like a perfect time to launch the third of the fourth main anchor points that we'll be weaving into the web of our Wyrdest Web podcast series. The Wyrdest Web 3.0 will focus on magic lessons, techniques, and exercises, which encompasses a number of things, which will unfold as we move along. This branch of our podcast is focused on learning various techniques and mythologies associated with magical practice and highlighting the sovereignty of the energetic self so that we may become stronger in ourselves and therefore stronger in our connection to others and the world. I'm your weird hostess and even weirder resident high priestess, Caitlin Moore-Waltzer, and welcome everyone who is tuning in. So why are we doing this? Well, apart from the fact that it was part of my master plan initially, people have been asking me about this type of stuff. And I've already expressed how I feel about taking on students in my previous podcast. So this is a more comfortable alternative for me. And I may or may not be putting out some digital classes if that feels like something people would be interested in. And just, please comment below or DM me if you feel like you might dig that. Today, we are doing a short little episode and doing a quick dive into the first part of a preparation for magical practice. That is connecting. Okay, there are several pillars of preparation when we're going into any kind of energetic or magical work. Connection is first. And we're starting here because if you're not connected, then you are not going to move anything forward. So not only are you going to not be able to put anything magically forward to work for you, but nothing in your life will take off at all, right? Connecting is key. And you may need to practice this a lot before moving forward with anything else. And that is perfectly fine. If you're a novice, this is a great place to start. To people more naturally inclined or to practitioners that have been doing this for a while, then you're likely already deeply connected and you just need to put focus on it so it grows into something more tangible and workable. And if you're someone who's already putting focus on it and it's already grown into something more tangible and workable, then you can just join us and go ahead and tune into the energies anyway and do a scan on yourself and see where you're at, do a little energetic check-in. So sometimes when you delve into a book, etc., it will advise you to collect certain tools before you start practicing. This is unnecessary. The power source is you and your connection to the divine. Okay, you are the practitioner. All of that resides within you. Any tools that we use focus our intention, but they aren't, and they do have inherent properties in and of themselves, but it's the connection between you and those things that directs the magical focus, okay? So, don't misunderstand me. Tools are great. Tools are pretty, and they're also incredibly helpful, and some of them can even be very, very powerful in terms of engaging your energy into focus. But to think that you need any kind of intermediary between you and the divine is ridiculous, in my opinion. You don't even need another person to do that. The connection is just between you and source, okay? So throughout history, we see many physical items associated with magical practitioners. Magical items could be things like symbols and tools that have become completely associated with spiritual practice, like crosses. And yes, the cross is one. The rose cross is another, not to be confused with the cross. The Ankh, the tree of life, the Star of David, the pentagram, etc. All of these things. We also have things like the censer, incense, brooms, various offering plates and dishes, blessed bowls, holy water, all kinds of altars, certain sacred foods, flags of peace, right? Certain ritualistic practices on certain days, right? Like full moon on a Friday or something like that, or sundown on a Saturday for the Sabbath, right? Certain times, things like that. So these, of course, echo prior practices down the hallways of history, which we've kind of been touching base on a little bit. And they have various meanings and origins and correspondences and backstories of why these types of things and practices and tools, et cetera, and symbols have come into being. oftentimes people engage in a practice or interact with an object without really understanding the deeper meaning of that thing. So, as per example, the Star of David is a flattened version of a Platonic solid, the six-pointed star, and it is a flattened version of the star tetrahedron or the Merkaba. Okay, the pentagram, which is a five-pointed star, is also an expression of a Platonic solid called the dodecahedron, and also the symbol of the Pythagorean Society of Learning. Okay, that Pythagoras led, and it was the symbol of protection. It was the symbol of, earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, the connection of the divine to man or woman, people. And, it's people are so afraid of that symbol, and it's absolutely freaking ridiculous because it's actually really protective. But because these things are not taught, either due to the obscurity of the origins of those things and nobody really knows, or because knowledge is power, and certain things that were once common knowledge have been stomped out and replaced, or they were always kind of hidden and have remained behind like sort of the Wizard of Oz's curtain, because for humans en masse to really understand certain things would make the general public far too aware of their own power, right? And this would dismantle those in charge, right? And by the way, somebody somewhere always knows the origins of these things. Like if you don't, or your immediate circle doesn't know, there is somebody out there that definitely knows, right? Always. So, and sometimes these things get overthrown anyway, right? Like, as per example, here's an example. Think of what literacy does to advance a culture, right? And why? Because the sharing of ideas spawns new ideas and so on. Books are a huge part of that, right? All kinds of forms of writing, right? In the medieval times and slightly down the line, the church kept the general masses in a state of illiteracy, and the only ones allowed to read and write and learn and research were royals and clergy and otherwise wealthy people, because they needed to maintain the illusion that only the elite and the wealthy had a direct connection to God and source energy and magic, etc., thus disempowering others, because that's how that happened. And how they, surprise, are still doing the exact same thing. So, and remember what we're learning, what we were learning in yesterday's podcast on Ask a Priestess. The Mesopotamians created the concept that those who can read, write, research, and articulate are the ones that run society, and everyone else is a labor worker, right? So, sound familiar, right? Now, can someone still be very powerful without these things? Yes. It doesn't make you any less of a valuable person on a humanitarian level, but you will have trouble accessing necessary information and accessing ideas and accessing all types of things unless you are completely connected to yourself, right? That hasn't changed much. To put this into perspective, each letter of any alphabet, doesn't matter the language or the origin, those are examples of sacred symbols that are put into a particular order to convey information, and that deepens the understanding of whatever the writing is about. So the intellectual advancement that society has undergone after, the intellectual advancement that society underwent after the advent of the printing press is an obvious testament to the power of the written word. And that is, in fact, why they call the act of putting letters in certain orders to form words and sentences, etc., spelling, right? The root word is spell, cast a spell, which is a cute catchphrase. And it's a little kitsch in my opinion, but if you look at the morphology and the etymology of the word spell, that's actually true. So now, as I've said before, the written word does not outweigh experience, right? Ever. However, it can open doors to inviting those experiences into one's life and provide some general guidelines to follow as you create your own experience around whatever it is, right? Like we'd have a lot of dead hikers, a lot more, if nobody wrote a book about what it's like to scale Mount Everest, right? And the things that you should prepare for that, right? We'd have a lot more people diving with sharks that weren't prepared for the fact that sharks will kill you, right? There's all these things, right? So, beyond that, there are really an infinite number of tools. And why infinite? Because everything, like literally everything, can be used as a proverbial key that opens a lock of discovery. So, or a lock on a door of discovery. The practitioner, again, is the magician, and the title magician indicates that the magic exists within the practitioner themselves. So do other things hold their own properties? Yes, of course. But the practitioner chooses the tool with the resonance of energy that they want to use to flavor whatever it is they're doing, right? Think of it like water drops, right? The water already exists and so on. And so does the container in the form of the magician. But you might want like, I don't know, tropical punch mango magic for one thing and cherry berry for the next, right? So that in real life would translate to, maybe you're doing something with acorns or you're doing something with music, right? Those are two different, totally different flavors because you can combine them, but each thing has a different sort of flavor. Then there are the traditional tools used for particular purposes, but a tool can also be a natural item of any kind. It can be an unnatural item too. It can be anything personal to you. So it can be any type of food, a song, a piece of clothing, anything deeply personal and meaningful to the practitioner. But you also don't need anything except yourself. You don't need anything except yourself, your mind, and your will. Those are the primary things. Even if your body is not working, okay, you're unable to access any kind of range of motion, your mind and your will are really what you need, and an imagination. The other accoutrements are lovely things to have, and they can add a lot of fun and flair to someone's journey, but don't be tricked into thinking that you need to buy a bunch of stuff in order to practice, okay? The stuff is stuff. You are magic to the core of your cells. We all are. And the human body is an incredible conductor of electricity and energetic current. So is everything else, right? Like we are made of a lot of water, and water is the best conductor of electrical current. So with everything pulsating with the currents, it creates an incredible amount of propulsive movement. So magic is the focused intention of merging our energy with the mass undercurrents of all that is and directing it to a particular thing. Okay. So when we're going to go into an exercise here in a couple of minutes, and you're going to choose some kind of tool to help you focus, but you also don't have to. It can be you and the earth in the room, but if you need to have a tool or something to focus on, then have it be something incredibly personal to you, okay? Or something that you like. That's fine. It doesn't have to be that deep. Before one engages in any magical practice and picks up any tool, however, there are some requirements that need to be in order. So first, you have to consciously connect to your own energy and the energy of the all. And you don't need to be particularly spiritual or religious to do this, to tap into this current, because it's very much not an esoteric thing. Like it's a physical thing with many esoteric properties, but if you're someone that can't wrap your mind around the esoterica piece of it, or don't want to for whatever reason, that's also fine. And yes, my lovely atheist listeners, I'm talking to you. I'm going to teach you how to do this anyway, because it is important to be connected to life, if anything else, to be connected to life, right? So to tap into it, the first thing you're going to do is close your eyes and envision, become aware of all the different movement patterns that are constantly happening in and around the earth. All right. Even if they're not readily apparent or visible to the naked eye, right? The earth doesn't just stop moving and become still just because we go to sleep, right? Or zone out to something, right? It doesn't put the rest of everything on pause. But what's happening is actually pretty incredible, because if you think of all the things that are constantly in motion on the earth and around the earth, so weather patterns, ocean currents, the movements of bugs in the earth, and roots growing, and tectonic plates are shifting, and birds are flying around and chirping and singing, and the vibration of every vocalization of anything with a voice, every footfall of anything walking or crawling or slithering along, right? Every instrument played, every school of fish or dolphin pod swimming or octopus, anything in the ocean, the currents that makes, right? The sonar from the whales, every flower growing, every shift in the patterns every time someone is born or crosses back through the veil of death. The list is infinite. The earth is alive. The earth is constantly in motion. The water tables under the earth. All of these things, and so you have to tap into this. So just visualize, become aware of that fact. Okay. Then focus on your own body. All right. the breathing of the body, the movement of the body, the pumping of the blood, the fluttering of your lashes, the itching on your skin, any of these things, you're fidgety, your feet are cold, like any of these things, become very aware of your body as a thing in motion. Because even when you're still, your body is actually in motion. Okay. We have like billions of tiny, tiny little microscopic insects crawling all over us at all times, which is gross, but they're actually there to help and they're moving. Okay. So every time something moves, it emits an electrical current, and that's a fact, right? So if you think of all the electrical currents being emitted, right, all the sound currents, all the motion, everything being emitted, that creates a vibratory field of electricity. And you are also creating a vibratory field of electricity. So what you're going to do is visualize your own electrical currents connecting to the current of life. And sometimes what helps me with that is to imagine all of those currents pouring into a giant river of energy that just is going forward with everything, just the motion of life, the moving forward. And you're going to just kind of jump into that river. All right. If that energy or if that visualization doesn't feel good or safe to you, you can pick something else. You can imagine it as just like a giant egg of energy and just sit in that. But try to connect out to the world. Also, if you're new to this, that can feel very overwhelming and hectic. And if it feels chaotic, it's because it is. If it feels overwhelming, it's because it is. And you can narrow that down by focusing on a specific current of energy rather than all of it, which, unless you are in a particular state of mind, can be very difficult to manage. So you can narrow it down. And one way to narrow it down is to choose a tool of some kind, right? Something valuable to you. So here's a quick exercise to practice this. You can even, you can use something like crystal, an apple, whatever. A plant is always lovely. And even better is a willing pet or a willing partner or friend. And little sidebar here, emphasis on the word willing. So first, we do no harm. We never engage in the energy. We never engage in any energetic practice or sharing or anything like that with an individual without their permission. Okay. And do not force any being to bend to your will. It violates the cosmic law of free will, and it will render anything you do as ultimately either ineffective or completely destructive, with the bulk of that coming back on the person that cast it out. Okay. So obeying the utmost law of harming none, unless it's out of self-defense, it's absolutely critical. Okay. If you can't find a willing creature, then you can just put your hands directly on the earth or on the object that you've chosen. Okay. You can also use a tree, etc. So first, it's best to be as relaxed in your body as possible. And you want to take a deep breath. You want to just let the breathing flow through you. So start breathing and breathe slowly in and slowly out. And as you're breathing, you want to kind of envision the air coming in and out of you like a wave of the ocean coming in and pulling back out, okay? Then you're going to envision a small little flame of light in your hara, in your solar plexus or your belly. For those of you who don't know what that is, the solar plexus is about 2 inches above the belly button. So you're going to focus in right there. And you're going to close your eyes and envision a flame. And as you breathe in, you're going to breathe all the way in and then breathe out and expand that flame as if you're blowing on a fire pit that you're starting. Okay. You want the air to feed the fire. So you're going to blow into that flame and you're going to just kind of allow that to flame up around you in a little bit of a shield. Okay. From there, you're going to pull a cord, and you can do this with your hands, or you can do it if you're really good with imagination. You're going to pull a cord of light out of your solar plexus, like a little cord, and you're going to attach it to whatever you're holding, be it a cat or a boyfriend or girlfriend or etc., or a crystal or a pillow, something. You're going to a book, doesn't matter what it is. You're going to attach that cord of light to that thing, and you're going to start to see the cord of light form into a figure 8, like an infinity pool. like those infinity pools you see at those amusement parks or whatever. Figure eight slowly, just kind of going back and forth in a figure eight between you and the other being that you're holding. Okay. And that's it. That's the exercise. Now you can hold this energy as long as you like. And when you're ready, or if you feel like you want to be challenged, then once you have that energy loop in place, you can expand to something else. As for example, if you and your cat are doing this exercise, you can visualize the loop opening to include a third thing. Okay. And then it would open from a figure eight into more of like a triangle, right? A triangle with curved edges. Another pet or plant or person, ideally, I'm going to backtrack really quickly. If you are very practiced and you're very sensitive to energies, you can actually do this with whatever you want, with whatever kind of object you want. It does work best. It's a little more easy to sense and visualize if you are working with a living, breathing, sentient beings. And you can argue that all things are sentient, but I'm talking about like your dog or your cat or a plant, if they're willing, right? If you want to do this with another person, it can create a very powerful effect if both of you are visualizing that. And that's a different kind of sensation altogether. The energetic currents of things that like pillows tend to be a lot weaker than something that's conducting its own electricity, right? Because it's inert. And it's made of synthetic material that, may or may not have some interesting things in it. So maybe you want to try this with somebody you trust completely. And that's it. That's the lesson for today. So we're going to go into another lesson in a bit. Do this every day for a week. And as you get more comfortable with this practice, you'll be able to drop in and do this at a moment's notice, even if you're in traffic or the grocery store, and use it for all kinds of things. The final point that I want to make on this subject, as we discussed, is always ask for permission. So if you're even working with your cat, you want to say to your cat, is it okay if I connect with you energetically? Now, your cat, you might actually hear a response in your head. Animals are incredibly communicative, and they sense and know, right? They know, they're aware of everything going on. If you have got a strong relationship with the animal kingdom, then you know this. And also, if they say no, then that's like your first intuitive hit. If they say no, then just drop it, find something else, right? Don't drop your cat, drop the attempt. But most of the time I found that, animals really love energy. They're very excited to be around energy. And you'll start to see the response as you consciously emit this energy and you're touching your animal. They will act very, lovey-dovey, and they love it. They're really into it most of the time. It depends on the cat, it depends on the animal. So, but you always ask for permission. And if you're doing this with someone, we'll get into this a little bit later. If you're doing this with someone who is, say, you're in a hospital room and you want to connect your energy to somebody, and they're in a coma, okay, you ask permission anyway, because you're talking to their higher self and to their spirit team. You ask permission, and you go ahead and do it. If the answer is no, nothing will happen. So it's not going to affect either way. If it's yes, you'll usually feel some kind of synergy. But either way, you have to ask. It's a protocol. And also, last final point, you never ever take energy from anyone. I have heard this as a practice for certain types of systems, and it is, to me, appalling. You do not need to take energy from anybody. If you are a true practitioner, your only power source should come from the divine at all times. You do not take from anyone. And you also should not be giving your own personal energy to anybody. Like, that is something, if you are a channel for divine energy, it's like a waterfall flowing over you, and you're a constant current, and the energy goes out. You're a never-ending source of supply. I don't mean you should ignore your own boundaries. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you're working on somebody energetically or doing something for them, that energy, as a practitioner, you are a conduit of divine love, of divine light. You do not take energy from anybody. You do not give your own energy to anybody, okay? Because those forms of magical practice are very, very low vibrational. They just are. And I don't like to cast shade, but any practice where you're taking from someone without their permission, without their knowledge, because you feel like you're doing some kind of exchange. Like, no, hard no. If you want to do that, you go right ahead and find out what happens, because it's just not, it's not the best. We can get into that on another podcast and the reasons why behind it. But that's all for this evening. We will be updating our artist podcast series in a couple of days. And thank you guys for tuning in to this third thread of the Wyrdest Web podcast 3.0 Magic Lessons. Just so you guys know, over the next few months, I will be in an accelerated medical apprenticeship. So I will be trying to get these out as regularly as possible, but there might be a couple lags as I'm like sitting for exams or studying, etc. So, but it should be on schedule, but I don't know yet because I don't know what my life is going to look like 6 weeks from now. So in terms of how much energy I have, but we'll definitely be getting the podcast out. They just might not be on the exact day that they initially were. So just an FYI. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in to the Wyrdest Web podcast 3.0 Magic Lessons, the Wyrdest Grimoire, otherwise known as. I am your weird host and even weirder resident high priestess, Caitlin Moore-Waltzer. And until next time, guys, keep it weird.